And last, we are asking our Shepherd God to give us wisdom and humbleness in keeping the mission at the center of our heart at all time and during all circumstances. So thank you, everyone. And Teresa, we can have our presentation. It's just a small prayer.
Share screen now, okay? Thanks, Veronica. Thank you so much for that lovely prayer. Gonna share screen. Hopefully we're doing it right because we are calling it up straight from the Microsoft Teams this time.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Veronica.
Okay. So this grant writing workshop is actually our third session, and we'll be having few more other sessions that's happening concurrently in other coming months. And Teresa, maybe next slide.
Okay, here we are.
Okay, so the reason why we're having this grant writing workshop is all of us, we want everyone, every unit, all the MDO partners to be able to produce a good, proposal paper together and submit to our donor agencies. And the reason we are doing this is also because of our mission sustainability. Okay, for our mission to continue and find new donors. So in order for us to do that, we have to learn and adapt ourselves to some new effective grant writing techniques. Now, we are going to look at some of the objectives on, what are we going to do today? So we are going to introduce some of the different components of a grant application. Now, the components that we are going to look at will be problem statement, rationale and justification for implementing the project. And then we'll move on to the project goals and objective. Next will be the strategy and activities. And of course, we will look at the results, which is an overview of the output and outcomes. And then we will look at how are we going to put a Gantt chart or the activity plan. And lastly will be the budget. And actually, Ilyas will walk us through on all these various components of the grant application. Next will be in developing, Teresa, sorry, I think it's the presentation is, okay, thanks. In developing the projects, we have to actually also know some of the, approaches that we'll be looking together, or Teresa have actually gone through some of these approaches in our past sessions, which is like right-based approach, project cycle management. All of us have gone through this Project DPRO, or most of us who are here today have actually attended the project cycle management course. In developing projects together, we have to have very clear overview of all these different areas of proposal development. Followed by that, we will also be looking at some of the important documentation, which is like the Good Shepherd corrigational documentation, which is our position paper, our corrigation direction statement, and then the SDG as foundational documents in framing our projects. Why are we doing certain things? We have to look at this documentation on why are we actually submitting a proposal, or why are we actually looking into doing a particular thematic area. And last, guide participants through the completion of grant application process. The next session, we will look at what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, okay? Now, yeah, thanks, Teresa. After today's session, okay, which is what we are looking at, laying the groundwork for effective grant writing, we will have another 2 more sessions in the month of April and May. Originally, we are supposed to have our session, the next session in the month of March, but our AP assembly is happening in the month of March, so it's going to be a very busy month for everyone. So we have moved the date to the month of April on how to complete the grant application, and both Teresa and Ilyas will be giving you all some homework, take-home work to do. so that we can all understand and apply whatever we have learned and apply it back in the proposal homework that Teresa is going to give everyone. And on our last session, which is happening in May, we don't have the dates yet in April and May. We'll ask you all later. Supporting documents to grant application, which will be looking at the activity plan, the log frame, and the budgets. So we have all this laid out to us. Now we're going to work together and see how we can just make good proposals together. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing screen at this moment so that you can see each other now. Do you have any questions over the time, the entire package? Are you good with that?
Yes, Teresa.
Yes, okay. If you're good, let's continue now. We have a lot to do today. Okay, so the next that I'd like to bring you through, very important in writing a grant and submitting grant applications, is actually to know two things, to know the organization, the congregation that we belong to. And so in every grant proposal that you come across, there will surely be a section that says, where are you coming from? What's the name of your organization? Tell us a bit about your experience in this project that you are applying for, no? So it's important to know your organization, to know the congregation. If assuming you are like SMIDY Fee, no? St. Mary Euphrasia Integrated Development Foundation Incorporated, then you will talk about SMIDY Fee. If you are Good Shepherd Sisters Sri Lanka, then you will talk about Good Shepherd Sisters Sri Lanka. So we introduce the congregation, the organization to the donor agency, and then we talk about our vision, our mission, our core values, if that's asked for. And very important, almost all donor agencies will ask you, what are your priority areas in social justice? So we will have to share what our core mission is about when we are applying, And if you're applying for a grant on gender-based violence, you will need to share your involvement in gender-based violence and where are the areas that you're working on? What are you doing with regards to gender-based violence at this moment? And then your approach in mission. Most donor agencies today support the rights-based approach, in mission, in carrying out the mission. So we need to be very clear when we are talking about the approach to mission. What is the approach that your project that you are conceptualizing? What is the approach that you're looking at? And today we will look at rights-based and theory of change as well. What are your governance and accountability structures? Who are the ones that are seeing to child safeguarding? Who are the ones that are looking at finance? Who are the ones that are, monitoring and managing the grant? Questions like this will be asked in the application form. And last but not least, for all of us who are here, it is the capacity to carry out the project that you are applying for. We all know that some of us in this Zoom screen here and people back in our units and in our programs, there are some of us who are very, very good at writing proposals. We can write all kinds of proposals and submit to donor agencies. But when the proposal gets approved, the important thing is, are you able to carry out the projects? And therefore, the first criteria before we even write a proposal is to ask, do you have the capacity to carry out the project that you're applying to the donor agency for? So these are some points that we would like to share with you on our organization background that's needed for all donor applicants. And this is in the Project D Pro course that we all took. You will see in the first 1/3 here, principles of project management. You will find this in figure 6 in the Project D Pro course, And here, many of us, when we took the course together, we said that project and program management is actually a combination of the science and the art of managing both together. And when we talk about Project DPRO, the competency model, no? So in our organization, we must make sure that we have the technical skills, we have the leadership and interpersonal skills, we have the personal and self-management skills, and we have development specific criteria within our organization. I will not go through this because it is already in your book, the Project DPRO book. So let's move on. The next important thing to know is to know the donor agency. If assuming you are applying, almost all of us here know about Mission Cara. Just for an example, if you're applying to Mission Cara, you really need to know, is your project aligned with the funding priorities of the donor agency in the thematic area, the target group, etc. So if assuming your thematic area is to work on digital literacy, using cyber techniques, using the internet, etc. And you apply to a donor agency that doesn't have this thematic area, then it is very difficult for the grant to be approved. Is your country on the priority listing? At the moment, we know that countries like Malaysia, like some parts of India, are not on donor agencies' priority listing because we have moved from a third world country into a developing country status. What is the limit of their grants? Does it meet your requirement? What do they fund? What is it that they fund? What do they give money for? Many agencies, donor agencies, do not fund human resource. So we have to be very careful which donor agency we write to and what are their requirements. Can your organization or proposal meet with these requirements? If they require you to give them vouchers and receipts and to submit everything, on a monthly basis to them for their monitoring, do you have the capacity to meet these requirements? So these are some important things that we want to share with you on the organization, the Congregation of Good Shepherd, the organization that's applying for the grant, and on donor agency. So I'm going to pause here and ask if you have any questions. The next thing that I want to bring you to, if you remember what Veronica shared just now, is to look at where we are in the congregation. And this is so important, for all of us, that we must know our position papers. We must know what direction and what priority the congregation is moving into. Assuming we have this very big need in the community, but it is not something that is Good Shepherd's position, in priority area. So you need to ask yourself and go back to your leadership team and say there is this urgent need, within the community that we are working with, but it's not on our priority area. Now, what do we do next? We're not saying don't do projects that are not in the priority areas, but what shall we do, and is this our focus? Just have a bit of discussion as you are discerning to start new projects. So I've put the link here. When you get these slides later, when you click on the link, it will bring you to our website, the Good Shepherd Congregation's website, on the position papers. And if you scroll down, you will see all the webinars that we have done. Webinars by Winifred on the theoretical framework and webinars on the application of each position paper. So if you're not sure what the position papers are all about, this is the link to go to. And I encourage you to go into this link and to really be immersed in the position papers. The next thing that we need to look at, and this is our 31st Congregational Chapter Direction Statement. In the 2015 Direction Statement, it talked about integrating social justice, spirituality, and good ministry practices, and to have strategic plans, etc. If you look at this direction statement that has just been released, there is one call to action that is really very important, and it speaks to all of us as mission development people, the universal culture of justice. And in this, there are two bullet points, main bullet points. The first is to address areas of internal injustice within the congregation. And the second is to address areas of external injustice through our respective ministries. And this is where it is so important for us when we talk about addressing internal injustice, now we all know that many of us, all our staffing, our people who are working, our partners in mission who are working with us are paid through the projects, and their salaries are factored in through the projects. So as people, sisters, if you are here and if you're in decision-making roles, and lay partners in mission, if you are in decision-making roles as well, look at how you factor salaries into the projects. Make sure that your project staff are justly paid, because this is an internal justice that we need to be mindful of to ensure that the mission is sustainable beyond us, and that good people are working in the projects, and people have the also insert into the projects capacity development for people who are working in the projects. And of course, the external injustices, we know all the things that are happening around us and all the things that your project addresses. Now, I want to talk about the rights-based approach. Yeah, the rights-based approach. Many of us here, I think all of you on this screen, with the exception of maybe one or two who are very new to the mission, who may have just joined us this year. And for people like Jane and Titinia from Kenya, you may not have heard this, but I just encourage you to follow as much as you can. I will not go into details into the rights-based approach because we already have done this. And there are YouTube links in the Asia Pacific YouTube channel that speaks about this. So in a nutshell, when we're talking about rights-based and the congregation, we're actually incorporating the charity, the needs-based, and the rights-based into one approach, And we have this position papers and our 2015 congregational direction statement that asks us to look at social justice. So this is where it is heading. If you look at the 2021 congregation direction statement, so many parts in it talk about being rights-based and being having the rights-based approach. So when we look at this, many of us here we understand in our minds, but we don't know how to implement it. What is the rights-based approach? Is it something from the UN? Is it in line with Good Shepherd spirituality? Is it part of the church documents? And why do we need to change? It's already difficult as it is running our programs. And there's a lot of fear, in this change. And so when we look at the rights-based approach, there are two concepts that we need to understand: the rights holders and the duty bearers. So rights holders are people like all our program participants. You and I, individuals, are rights holders. Families, communities, society at large, we are all rights holders. And when we look at duty bearers are the government, the state or non-state actors, and people like us, Good Shepherd, who run residential programs, who are in positions of power over our program participants. We are also duty bearers. And our programs address the capacity gaps between the rights holders and the duty bearers. Now, what do we mean by this? So when we just focus on the program participant and the family, normally this is a charity or a needs-based approach. If we enlarge it a little bit, and we look at the community, the people that we're working with, we run awareness programs, etc. This is still charity and needs-based. But when we look at rights-based, we're looking at the country and we look at international laws. We're looking at our countries and saying, is the Philippines a signatory to CEDAW? Has the Philippines signed on the Convention on the Rights of the Child? What are the laws in the country that talk about women's rights, children's rights? And how are our programs addressing all the needs from the program participant right up to the international conventions? And this is called a rights-based approach. So normally when we start off, it's sometimes not possible to straight away go in and talk about rights to people. No, we need to start on charity and needs approach. And as we develop and cultivate trust and relationship in the community, then we move on into a deeper level of talking about the mission and social injustice with the program participants. So I'm going to move on to the next slide to make this clearer for you. When we talk about a rights-based approach, what are the types of activities that you can do? What are the types of activities and projects that you can do? Not programs, but projects. So, and when we talk about rights-based, it's the empowerment of rights holders. Okay, so we look at this part here, program participant, no? Program participant. Here, when we do our projects and our activities, we talk about the restoration of dignity, of self-worth, of confidence. We talk about equipping our program participants with skills, with knowledge. So when we talk about this, assuming you are running a program for women in unplanned pregnancies, that means this is a program that we try not to do at the moment, but I know there are still many places that do this, women who come in who have unplanned pregnancy. So when they come to Good Shepherd, they are feeling very low in their self-worth. They are feeling that they have been rejected by their boyfriends or, their significant ones, and the whole family system has rejected them. So when they come in, we look at restoration of dignity, self-worth, confidence. We look at what kind of skills they have, what kind of knowledge, and we do our programs accordingly, our activities accordingly. And then we look at knowledge of rights and how to access rights and how do they know their own responsibility. So when we journey with a woman or a young girl who has come in, after we get to know them and we reduce the trauma that they experience in our case management, in the way that we approach them, we would now know what are their rights, and where their rights have been violated. And we would teach them their responsibilities and their rights as well. And then we look at educating the community, the families, the society at large on individual and collective rights and responsibilities. Then we form support groups. We liaise with other NGOs. We have coalitions. And if we find that as we do our case study, that the police, the judicial system, the schools, have been unjust to this girl because she was not able to access her rights, then we advocate for systemic changes. And when you do all these, you're actually helping the rights holder to claim their rights, So these are some of the activities and interventions that you can do when you are looking at the empowerment of rights holders. Now I go into the accountability of duty bearers. That means you are holding the government in your country accountable for not fulfilling their rights, for not fulfilling the rights of the program participants, the families, and the society where your program is located. So here, when we look at this, all of us, we really must understand what are the constitutions in your particular country. What are the laws that you have to protect people, especially those who are underserved communities, people who do not have a voice for themselves? And if we look at Good Shepherd, primarily we work with women and children, but we must also expand our program, our projects, and our activities to reach out to men and boys. Because when we talk about gender-based violence, both sides have to understand the rights of individuals. Then we need to look at the policies in the country and what social protection mechanisms there are for women and children who are experiencing violence. One small example I want to give you on social protection mechanism is that in almost every country, you have social welfare systems. And in these social welfare systems, they do have assistance in terms of financial aid, in terms of housing, in terms of benefits within the government system for women and children who are experiencing marginalization. For example, in India, they have guidelines and policies where if a girl marries above 18, the family is entitled to some benefits. If a person who's of indigenous background, who is Dalit or of the tribal caste, if this person goes to the hospital to deliver her baby, then the family is also given some incentive. And all this is to prevent child marriage and to prevent forced marriage. and to ensure that the health system is in place to encourage people to go to hospitals rather than to give birth at home. So if you need to know what are the social protection mechanisms that are available in your countries. And of course, you know, on the international level, you need to know if your country are already signatories to all the different conventions and to all the different covenants that are available to protect human rights. And we are also duty bearers, yeah, Good Shepherd, especially when we are in positions of power in relation to our program participants. So it is important for us to also know what our accountabilities are to the people who are in our programs. And therefore, we have child safeguarding policies. We have different standard operating procedures that we need to adopt to make sure that our program participants are safe. We need to make sure that when we employ somebody to work with vulnerable people, that we are confident that this person will not abuse the program participants when they are on their own. So these are some things that we need to be very aware of. Okay, and I would just like to, this is about, okay, I'm just going to share, I may have reversed the thing. Let me see. Okay, this is still parts of rights-based. Because when we talk about rights-based, we are talking about doing analysis, and we're talking about addressing root cause and manifestations. And for many of us, it is not easy to address root causes. So I'm just going to show this very short video.
The first of our 7-step M&E plan is identifying the problem and the need for a project. Before we begin to conceptualize a project, it is essential to understand the underlying problem in the community of interest and explore what's causing it. What interventions could solve it, and how long the intervention would need to last for it to be effective. The project will thus be designed accordingly. There are many strategic ways to identify the focal problem and its causes, but one common way organizations define these are through a problem tree analysis. This is a group activity that involves input from project team members, stakeholders, and beneficiaries who can contribute relevant technical and local knowledge. The first activity involves defining the main problem that all team members mutually agree upon and visualize it on a flip chart or a whiteboard as the trunk of a tree. Next, through many rounds of dialogues and discussions, the team identifies the causes of the problem and visualizes them as the roots of the tree. Finally, the team brainstorms on the potential consequences of the problem and exhibits them as the branches of the tree. Team members can also add additional branches for solutions, concerns, and decisions. This is an effective practice as it maps out a realistic picture of a problem from economic, political, and socio-cultural dimensions, while building a shared sense of purpose, action, and understanding amongst the involved parties.
Okay, so this is something very small on problem tree analysis. And this I have taken as a problem tree from the position paper of the girl child. So when we look at this, on top of this, where the leaves and the branches are the manifestations. That means, you know, these are things that we see when the girl's child, the rights of the girl child is being exploited, no? It's being violated. So these are the things that we see. Now, if you look at this below the ground, in the words in red, you have social injustice, social structure, systemic obstacles, religion, culture, and tradition. These are the root causes of why the rights of the girl child is being violated, no? So these are very big systemic issues. The thing is, when you're doing an analysis of the project that you're running and the community that you're working with, you need to be very critical to first identify the problem that you are addressing, and then you look at the root causes and what are the manifestations. And the question we ask ourselves is, do our programs and our projects and our activities address root causes as well as manifestations. So when we are looking at rights-based approach, it doesn't mean that we only address root causes and only do advocacy or only do awareness campaigns. We also need to address the manifestations, which is up here, no, in the leaves of the trees. And if children do not have access to education, we must find a way for programs that will enable the children to have access to education. And when you are working with populations like this, and when you are analyzing the case management, the data, no, of the children who come to you, when you're doing case management and you understand where these children are coming from, then you can do evidence-based advocacy because you have actual data from the children who are in your programs to prove the human rights violations that children are experiencing. And then you can do advocacy on systemic injustice, social structures, and systemic obstacles. So when we look at a project that you are doing and the intervention, that's why it's so important that you do documentation so that when you do advocacy, it is evidence-based, you know. So programs must address both root causes as well as manifestations. And this is where we are. Sometimes, you know, we need to shift in our own thinking. Sometimes we have gaps in our knowledge. We need to go beyond our comfort zones and say, it's time to change. You know, we cannot be doing the same thing every year. And then we need to review our internal governance structures in answer to the call to universal justice. So let's move on to this theory of change. When we look at the theory of change, okay, we are looking at a sequence of events where we will have input, activities, outputs, outcomes, and then the impact. And it goes one full cycle again. And then we have the assumptions, the enablers, and the indicators. So what are these actually? So for most of us here, we have done the theory of change. I don't know how many times, you know, in the region and also with individual countries. So I presume that most of you already know this. I will send you links to YouTube and also the PowerPoint presentations on this. So when we talk about theory of change, it is so important that we speak about the problem tree that we just did and ask ourselves, what is the main impact that the project is going to address? And if you know the impact, what's the big picture, no? Then you can say, how do we know that we have reached that impact through the outcomes? And then what are the outputs that will enable us to reach the outcomes? And what are the activities that will enable the output to happen? So in a theory of change, you prepare the project from big picture and come down, no? From impact to outcome to output to activities. I just want to share something that I think if I can see all of you, you'll be smiling, no? But I can't see you because I'm sharing screen. When I first joined Good Shepherd, no, and I didn't know about all this, we would always look at the activities first. Hey, what can we do, no, for this particular group? Let's plan this activity. And then we hope, no, as we plan this activity, that the program participants or this whole community will have a change in income. But we forgot that we are not the subject matter experts when it comes to people's lives, that we actually need to engage the stakeholders, to talk to them, to find out what's happening, and then to know what is the actual core problem that the project is addressing. So for many of us, myself included, we will do the activities, no? We will do the activity for one whole year, we get this budget, this funding, and then we wait and then we see, after 2 years, there's still no change to the program participant. There's still no change to the community, no? They're still the same. What have we gone wrong? Or worse still, we say, oh, this community is not grateful, no? We have invested so much money in them and there's still no change. But today, as we learn the theory of change, we understand that we have prepared our projects and our programs in a different way that does not have lasting impact. So the only way now is to learn the theory of change. And then we check the logic upwards. So what does this mean? It means this, you know, this is the results chain. From the inputs, that means the donor grants that you'll be getting, your human resources, your buildings, your people, your desks, your chairs, whatever, all these are inputs. And then we do the activities, actions undertaken to transform your inputs into outputs. So if you're running a residential program, your building, your staff, your beds, your mattresses, your kitchen, your food, all those are inputs. You use all those to run a residential program. These are the activities that you run. And within these activities, you also have case management, you have children going to school, you have after school care, you know, you have different things, you have counseling, all those are your activities. When you do these activities, you hope to get these outputs, okay? The end product and services, deliverables from the activities which are within your control. These are things that you expect to see. So if you're running a residential program, what you expect to see would be, say if you have 20 girls, no, then your output would be 20 girls have access to primary education, if it's primary education, have access to primary education and safe space to stay, you know, something like that. So that is the output that you expect to see, because you are in control from activities, from inputs, activities, and outputs, okay? Then from your outputs, you look at your outcome. What do you want to see? What do you want to see? Immediate effects on beneficiaries, which are beyond the team's control, but achievable given necessary conditions. So I use back my same example of the residential program. You have 20 girls, they are with you. Your outputs are that they go to school, that they have a safe space to stay. Now, the outcomes that you want to see, hopefully that you will see, would be these children will grow in self-confidence and will be able to make choices for themselves when they finish their residential program with you. And how will you have indicators to that? Elias will talk to you about those later. So these are things that you want to see happen, but can you control this? You can't control this because the program participant has a free will of her own, but you hope that this will happen. And the impact that you hope to see in the long term would be that, I don't know, that girls, you know, from this community, vulnerable communities, experience well-being and are able to be productive citizens, you know, in the long run, something like this. So this is long-term development. So this is how you look at a results chain. But when you are planning the project, you work from the impact downwards. You work from the impact, the outcomes, the outputs, the activities, and the last thing you do is the budget. But this is sometimes the first thing that we do, no? How much money we have, and then we plan the activities, but the money is always the last. So this is within your control, this is within your influence, and this is within your interest, okay? Within your control, within your influence, and within your interest. Next, you check the logic, okay? You start here, your starting point, okay? Your starting point is here, 1st January 2022. You have this project that you just got funding. So if you carry out these activities, question you ask yourself, then will you deliver these outputs? If we deliver these outputs, will we achieve this outcome? If we achieve this outcome, will we contribute to the impact? So this is how you check whether what you are planning for your activities will actually contribute to the overall theory of change that you want to see. And sometimes this whole process, in terms of your activities and your outputs, may take 5 years to do. It may not be within the year. So when you are writing to donor agencies, it is so important that you know the project and you know that this first year, this is what we will do. The second year, this is what we will do. The third year, this is what we will do. And then when you put all 3 years together or all 5 years together, this is the entire program or project that you are looking at. And then you ask for the money from the grant to do year by year. Because if you look at the money that you have and then you shape the activities, you may find that the money is not enough to get to where you want to be, the impact. And so when you actually do the overall framework and the overall conceptualize the overall project, then you can say, I need 500,000 to get this whole thing done. I need to have 6 donor agencies because one donor agency will not give us 500,000. So there are 6 places that I need to go and look for money. And these are the activities that I look for in year 1. And then I already know in year 3, this is what I need. So in year 1, I start looking for year 2 and year 3 already. So if you don't plan like this in terms of your organizational structure and in terms of your programs and projects, every year we will be looking for money without knowing which direction we are going, because we don't have an overall picture of where this project is moving. So I'm going to stop here in terms of
Right. So our time now is 3:01, so I think we're quite on time, and we'll be able to cover much of the things that I'd like to share. Again, a little disclaimer. I know that a lot of you has been working on proposal development since for the longest time for the mission, and maybe for some of you this is something new, but I'd like everyone to journey together on a refreshing course. So the session Teresa a while ago talks about the theoretical frameworks. So we talked about abstract things about how do we link proposal development, matching with the donor's expectations or calls, and then linking it to the organizational values of the congregation. But now I'd like to focus our conversation at this point in looking at the practical side of proposal development. And in doing so, I would like us to journey on very basic foundational aspects of a proposal that I think would be very critical for us to review at this point. So before I begin, please raise your hand if this picture is quite familiar to your. This is something that you feel or experience whenever you're doing a proposal. So just raise your hand or maybe give me a thumbs up if you can relate to this photo. Yes, Teresa, of course, you can relate. No one else? So to many, when you do proposals, yeah, I see Veronica. So only my teammates were getting confused whenever doing proposals. Oh, there I see Pipit. Hi, Pipit. So most of the time when we begin drafting a proposal, it looks like this. A lot of elements here, there, and then our problem, like what our sister from Kenya has asked, how do we translate this theoretical conversations into the practical side of the proposal development? So today I'd like to journey briefly on how to write the proposal. So it outlines the plan for the implementing organization about the project, giving extensive information about the intention for implementing it, the ways to manage it, and the results to be delivered from. So proposals have recently become more sophisticated. I know from several conversations from different units that before it's easier to ask money from donors. And I can see one or two faces here that reveals that scenario. So maybe those ones I see on the screen right now are the ones that have been doing proposals for the longest time. But now, for those who are journeying with the units in creating proposals, we see that donors tend to ask a lot, and the forms that they use keeps on getting sophisticated, but the essential parts remain the same. So it is a fundamental step that we write a good proposal to build a good relationship with donors. So for now, I would like us to walk through the first four parts of the grant writing workshop. So we will talk very briefly about crafting problem statements, and then we will link that together with the rationale or the justification for implementing the project. Then we move towards how to link the theory of change into the project goals and objectives, and then towards the strategies and activities. The fifth, the sixth, and the seventh part, the outputs and outcomes, will be discussed next month, as well as the Gantt chart and the budget. So for the meantime, we will be covering these four major aspects at this on this afternoon. But then I will consider briefly discussing about cross-cutting teams and monitoring and evaluation. So problem statement. So most of the time, problem statement is asked by all donors. So this is the section that gives an explanation about the issues that is being addressed by the project. So as it should be a brief declaration of what the project would like to achieve. But in many proposal templates, this is usually merged with the rationale. So what is a rationale? When we talk about rationale in the development sector parlance, it is actually the section that gives an explanation about the issues that are being addressed by the project. So it could be issue or issues. This section also argues in favor of implementing the project. So it gives all the, it's, I would like to think of rationale as the main defense of the proposal. Since we do not do pitching, we do not meet the donors and do a presentation like this to justify our project. The section of the rationale is actually like the soul of the project itself, because it argues in favor of why the donor or why is the grant giving organization has to support us. And it is very critical that we give evidence to what we're writing in this section. And evidences can be in form of other research, existing literature, or data collected by the organization itself. So let's take a look at a very simple example of a rationale. This is taken from sorry, Brother Peter. So this is a example from a project from Central East India. So we said there are three main elements that you have to see on the rationale. You have to see there what the problem that has to be addressed. Second, make an argument to support the project. And third, look at the results and the research and back it up with the data. Sorry, there, evidences. So when you look closely at this simple rationale, I have highlighted some parts here. So say, for example, this is an economic justice project. So economic justice, so especially in relation to women in India, in the issue of great concern, in a caste and class-ridden society, women from tribal and Dalit communities are discriminated and exploited. So right there and then in the second sentence, you already identify what is the problem that you would like to address. And then you give all the evidences that supports the problem. So it says here there are fourfold discrimination, but then you go towards the third paragraph. It says here why Central East India would still like to address the issue of discrimination with the Dalit and Dalit and tribal communities. So in their argument under the rationale, They said that though there has been a progress in the development of these communities compared to their past, they are not yet on an equal footing with the mainstream society on any development indicator. So that's very clear right away. And then towards the end part of the rationale, they argue what they would like to achieve. So they said here that they would like to target the capacity development of at least 240 women, 200 girls, 240 women, very specific, and at least 20 local leaders and power holders to become allies. In this kind of design, we already see that you don't really have to say a lot to have a rationale. The the trick in doing the rationale is to argue the case right away. In the problem statement, you usually say there what is the general problem in the geography, what are the laws that are not being implemented, what are the gaps in the implementation or in the rule of law. But when you link it towards rationale, you already say that there is an explanation of how the proposal will address the needs as shown in the statement of the problem. It already provides an explanation of the benefits. It gives a clear information on who will benefit and how will they benefit. And in the way you will form the statement is that you will more or less use the tense will, because this is something that you'd like to achieve in the future. So when we do the rationale, the main thing that I think I would like to the key message there is argue right away what you would like to achieve. Okay, so I know that a lot of you has been doing this, but just to make a distinction between a problem statement and a hello, hold on. So just to give a distinction between a problem statement and a rationale, the problem statement gives all the issues and the concerns that you would like to address. So there is no mention of what you would like to achieve. But in the rationale, you focus on the writing, on the argument, on how will you be able to achieve it. So more or less, some donors would ask for that part for a with character limits. In some donors, it would be free flowing. But in the case, for example, of some donors that we know, there is a limit of like 4,400 characters. So technically, when you're writing these sections, you have to respect and be mindful of the limits the donors have set. So if it is already indicated in the proposal template of the donor, for example, Caritas Italiana, if they have identified that the rationale should just be 4,400 characters, then we stick to it. You may ask, so does it mean, Elias, that if the limit is 4,400 characters, we can write 1,000 characters? Actually, the right answer would be yes or no, or it will be conditional. If within 1,000 words, you will be able to um, make the argument right away, make the best case about it, it's fine. But a personal tip from my end would be, whenever we write the rationale, as much as possible, we spend the whole character limit the donor has set. Because again, I told you, we don't face the donors and talk to them personally. The paper that we will submit to them will be the one that will give the merit. It will be the basis of the merit if they will approve the project or not. So as much as possible, write as much as you can. Now, let's go to the goals and objectives. As it is very simply put, the goal gives the direction to the project. And usually it is a high level statement. Say, for example, if the project is about operating shelters and community-based programs all together under one project, the goal statement should not be specific to running the shelters, but to the overall, like on a national level or a broader level of achievement that we would like to achieve. Relating to the problem tree analysis, like Teresa has mentioned a while ago, we have to go back. What are the roots? We have to make a distinctions in the problem tree analysis. What are the root causes and what are the manifestations? Unless we are clear on the problem tree analysis level, on the theory of change, we will not be able to create a good and substantial goal or objective statements. So I would really emphasize what Teresa mentioned a while ago. Project development starts with a good analysis of what we would like to achieve. What is the problem and how do we do it, the methodologies. Unless we know that by heart, it will be a very problematic proposal once we go right away in writing, just to fill out the forms of the donors. Similarly, the objectives, these are the specific targets. So if the goal is the high level target, the objectives are the specific targets that the project aims to achieve to meet the goal. In short, the goal can be seen as the high level shoot for the stars vision, while the objectives are the grounded, well thought out plan to reach that vision. To some donors, goal is also called ultimate goal, main goal, or purpose. So either of those four, it means the same. And then the objectives, to some donors, they call it outcomes or specific outcomes. And when we do that, it has to be, again, the goal can be high level, objective should be level headed, grounded to what we can achieve as an organization within a specific period of time. So very briefly, let's talk about objectives or outcomes. So again, these are the expected or the measurable changes that the beneficiaries of the project will encounter in the project. They can be changes in the behavior. So see here, these are the kinds of outcomes that we could um, develop. So say it could be a behavioral change, a change in skills, knowledge, or an attitudinal change, or a social or personal status change, which are deemed necessary to reach the overall goal. The causal connection between early outcomes, intermediate outcomes, final outcomes represent the pathway of change. More on this we can discuss when we do the log frame exercise next month. But again, if you look closely, between the difference between the purpose or the goal and the outcomes or the objectives. The purpose reinforce a system approach to prevention, protection, and reintegration of women and girls that are risk of and survived exploitation and trafficking. So if the purpose is this very high level, it can be supported by separate outcomes that would lead logically to the achievement of the purpose. So like here, we have identified 3 example outcomes. So one outcome would be the joint approach to awareness raising. Second is integration of best practices approach to human trafficking by provision of adequate care and support so that we can ensure that the women and girls will not be re-victimized. And we will, and then another outcome can focus on networking and strong collaborations. Linking it back to Teresa's explanation a while ago, remember there is this circle of change, circles of change. So there is the individual, the family, the community, then until we go internationally. Look at the outcomes, like the say the pillars of a table. Sorry, the legs of the table. Sorry, and then the purpose would be the I didn't know the parts of the table. I'm sorry, but the legs are the outcomes.
The surface of the table?
Yes, the surface of the table would be the purpose. Another thing that we'd like to identify at this point is that the purpose does not necessarily mean can be achieved only by one organization. So the purpose as a high level can be brought about, can be realized by a lot of other stakeholders, may it be the business sector, may it be another NGO, or the government itself. But at the purpose level, we acknowledge that our outcomes logically follows to the contribution of realizing the purpose. So it is tricky. Sometimes we write purpose statements as, you know, messianic or something that only we can achieve. But we have to be reminded that the purpose cannot be achieved by one organization. It is actually our work to focus on the outcomes, to make sure that the legs are strong, that the, you know, when we're, if we're carpenters, if we're doing a table, we have to make sure that the legs, the foundations, are the ones that we will focus on. And that's the same principle that goes when we write the proposal. Another example is here. The main goal is women and children experience fullness of life, free from abuse and exploitation. Of course, not just Good Shepherd can do this. We will be surprised that, you know, even in SDG, we acknowledge the the role of the business sector in achieving the sustainable development goals. But then we have three specific outcomes that can contribute to the realization of the main goal. And this is where the donor will focus. How are your outcomes designed, and do they logically follow the purpose or the main goal? This example comes from the Philippines. So if the main goal is fullness of life for women who experience abuse and exploitation, first outcome would be provision of caring, healing, and teaching, may it be in a community-based or in residential-based setting. Second is to work with local communities to prevent gender-based violence. Could be also trainings. It could also include, you know, commitments from cultural and political authorities to respond to gender-based violence. And then another outcome under this project design is that women become financially stable. So if you look at the design of the outcomes, they work on several layers. Outcome 3 and outcome 1 works on the person itself and their family, while outcome 2 works in a community and in a regional level, or in a national level. So if we're going to rate this kind of um, design, the way we would look at it, does outcome 1 generally acceptable to relate to the main goal? Like if we achieve outcome 1, we know that it doesn't necessarily mean that main goal will be achieved, but does it logically contribute to it? I think that's the question that we have to ask every time we develop the statements. Does the outcome logically follows the main goal? So there. I know that please, I'm breezing through these slides because I know that we've covered this a lot of times before, but I'd like you to bring on specific sections of these grant writing things that we have learned in Project DPRO, and to link it right to the reality of, you know, our daily work. Now, when we talk about strategy this time, usually strategy and activities are linked in many proposals. But when we say strategy, it describes the overall approach and, you know, how we would like to run the project. In many cases, strategy is also called methodology. So maybe you will encounter some donors who will, instead of asking for strategy, there will be asking for what is the methodology of the project. So for everyone who has been developing proposals before, it could be, you know, interchanged. Nevertheless, in answering the strategy or methodology, you ask several questions. So some questions will be, will there be partners in the project? Are the community directly contributing to the project design? How are they be involved in the project? And then will there be a promotion of ownership or sustainability towards the stakeholders, and how such actions will contribute to, after the project phases out. The strategy is linked to the activities I said before. So whenever strategy and activities are asked at the same time in project templates, this means that this section represent tasks or work you're going to perform in a project in order to reach the goal of solving the problem. The most important thing we need to keep in mind is that the activities section has to be closely correlated or connected to the objectives and strategies, which means the three sections, objectives, strategies, and activities, from different angles for the same goal, and the goal of the project all correlates to each other. So we will have a lot of more in-depth discussion about this when we talk about log frame and project designing next month. But what I would like to identify right now, if the rationale is the soul of the project, the strategy, the methodology, and the activities actually is like the brain of the project. Brain, I call it the brain because since the competition of getting funded is getting stronger, sometimes the donor would only have an allocation for 10 projects to approve every year. And then there will be 30 applicants. Let's say one of those would be Good Shepherd. We highly recommend that you pay more attention to the correlation of these three sections in your proposal. If the brain is healthy, the nerves, the whole body, the whole body could function well. So if there are no, if the strategy itself, relating it like how the brain works, if all the connections in your body with your brain is strong um, and there is a healthy nervous system, the donor would actually feel right away that you know what you are doing, and it gives a strong merit. Most of the time, donors would rank projects. So say for example, they receive 20 proposals and they will only be funding 10. All the proposals are ranked based on merit. So say for example, on methodologies, they will give 20 points. And then, they see a very strong methodology, they give you 20 points. And then on the rationale, not so much, they gave you 5 out of 10. If another organization gets 10 out of 10, then, you get a lower rank. And keep in mind that whenever we send a proposal, it does not mean that we get the money right away. But we do our best, we give our best for the mission to make sure that what we send to the donors reflect not just on the needs, but also on the capacity of the organization to implement it. So another tip, make sure that your strategy and activities is smart. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And in most cases, there is a need to explain the activities in the narrative section, in a narrative form, sorry. What I mean is that sometimes, for example, one of your activities would be distribution of hygiene kits. In the log frame, it's a bullet form. You can just put there activity 1, provision of hygiene kits. But when you do the methodology, we also tell the donor how we will carry out such an activity. We'll be using cash voucher. Will we be procuring everything locally or internationally, or from another place? How will we carry out the activity itself on the day? Will there be batch distribution, or are we going to go like an individual house to house distribution? So all of those needs to be explained. And of course, some donors would put some limits on your description, but as much as possible, imagine you're the donor, you will be the one receiving the proposal. Imagine that whenever you write, you put yourself in the position of the person who will read it. And that person who will read it will be the one who will also approve or disapprove your project design. So as much as possible, when we write proposal, we write it not on our angle. Sometimes I also had the habit of doing that. I write proposals from my angle without, considering the person who will read it, if they understood it. Sometimes there are acronyms, there are abbreviations, there are local terms that are not explained earlier in the proposal. So when you do that, it actually gives a greater impression to the donors that, okay, they're writing the proposal for me to understand what they would like to achieve, and not for them just telling us that, we need money and this is how we want to do it. All right. So briefly, again, the sequence, we follow the result sequence. In doing that, we prepare down the plan, imagine what the impact we'd like to achieve, and it should reflect logically to outcome, output in the activities. And then when you review it, review down, review going upwards. Does the activity that you identify follow logically the output that you'd like to achieve? Does the output contribute to the outcome? And then does the outcome contribute to the impact? So we write up down, when we write top to bottom, and then we review what we've done if they are logically sound from bottom up. Okay, yeah, check the logic upwards. So yeah, so somewhere slides here. So when we will deal a lot about this on the next session, but I just like to point out that, when we do the project development, these are the factors that we would like to keep in mind whenever we're crafting the hierarchy in the log frame. So for example, under inputs, of course, you have to look, we refer to the money, to the human resources, materials, and time. When we talk about the activities, are these trainings? Are these meetings, lobbies, publications? Are these provision of goods and services and outputs? Is this increase in knowledge and awareness? And then in the outcome, what kind of outcome would like to achieve? Is it behavioral, attitudinal, skills change? And then lead towards impact, and see if there is a final change in the level of the beneficiaries. See here, inputs, activities, outputs, that's our sphere of control. So this is something that we can manipulate when we write the project. But then under activities, outputs, up to outcomes, that's where we can only influence. It means when we design things, we actually at the mercy of the risk assumptions and of many internal and external things that may or may not directly or indirectly affect the project. So we can only influence this part. But then our goal, our dream is that whatever we can control and whatever we can influence, we hope to contribute towards our goal. And that's the sphere of interest. So these parts are something that we would like to objectively identify. So see here, if you point out on the inputs, activities, and outputs, we have the greatest power. When we go towards outcomes, a lot of things may play out. Ultimately, in the impact, we rely on God's grace most of the time. So, like Teresa pointed out, sometimes projects could just be 1 year or 5 years. In some cases, after a 3-year project, we saw that there are no changes at all, or there is a minimal change. We were not able to reach this impact level. So we asked the donor again, can we have another 3-year extension, or we would like to change our design, our control, because there are things during our first 3 years that we were not able to influence. And I would like to not give hope to everyone, but you know, donors would usually, especially those who've been doing development work like for a long time, like development assistance and all. Say for example, organizations like Misho or Caritas, they are aware that a 5-year project does not necessarily mean that the impact and the outcomes have been achieved. They are not under the assumption that after 5 years cholera in this country will be eradicated because of our intervention. It doesn't work like that. In the development scheme, again, we look at the sphere of control, and this is mostly where they will review the merit of your methodology. All right. So that's something we can monitor, and this is something also that we can evaluate. More on that later on. There. Now, I'd like you to jump towards cross-cutting themes this time. So cross-cutting themes, for many of you, you would encounter it in some large proposals, like they would ask, how does this project link to HIV/AIDS? How does this project link to environment? How does this project link to eradication of malnutrition, say for example? So the cross-cutting themes are additional issues or areas that intersect with the main project, or can be easily integrated into the project without losing focus on the main goal. So again, I know that some of you like familiar with Mission Cara. They would ask, of course, you have a project design, but towards the end of the proposal, they would ask you, how does this relate to HIV/AIDS? How does this relate to environment? So, while we have a main project theme, what happens is that they would also ask, how does this relate to other things that are of our priority concerns? But then, remember, don't lose focus when answering cross-cutting themes. You don't have to create activities just for cross-cutting themes. It's just that an iteration of how your project actually also solves other things or relate to other issues. So for example, a project addressing climate change resilience may also improve the health and incomes of local farmers. Or very specific, for example, if our project is sanitation project in a rural area, we have to identify how does this project on sanitation also improve the educational outcomes of children in that area. So you don't have to create additional activities. It's just that, how does this, in a greater scheme of things, how are we interrelated to other social issues? So it is best for the project to focus on one central issue. Avoid spaghetti syndrome. So if you want to find out about spaghetti syndrome, when we share the link, you can find out more about it. So briefly, the spaghetti syndrome is that, when you cook spaghetti, the pasta, you throw it to the wall and see if it sticks. If it sticks, then it's cooked. So in that process of throwing pasta on the wall, we waste a lot of pasta. So avoid doing that. Projects that chase multiple goals appear lacking in focus and disorganized, and most of the time merits lower scores. So make good solutions that are more comprehensive and looking at a more strategic way. So the mainstreaming of cross-cutting issues actually also revolves not just on the project design, but to the whole project management cycle. So in the field of development, mainstreaming a cross-cutting issue is generally understood as a strategy to make the theme an integral dimension of the organization's design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of development policies and programs. It also implies that relevant analysis and studies are conducted as the basis for integrating the cross-cutting issue into the design of the policies and programs. Say, for example, the donor is asking for how does it relate to environment? If we look at the circle here, and look at the financial and human resources, some of the answers to cross cuttings would be, instead of procuring from far away for the project, just for the lack of better term, the project will prioritize procurement on a local level. It means it will also reduce the carbon footprint. It will reduce, the cost on gasoline, on a diesel. It will also cause, it will also lower the, it will also um, help the local market. So things like that. My tip is, whenever you're asked about cross-cutting themes, try to imagine, how does my project also contribute to other things? Like, okay, I have a training, and of course in training, like in the Philippines, food is always there except for online meetings, unfortunately. So I think that's one thing that I don't like about online trainings anymore, because there's no food. But in a regular scenario, whenever there is training, there is food. So will you be using recyclable materials, or will you be, how do we minimize waste during the training? Are we going to use renewable resources? So things like that. Whenever we think about an activity, we think of the impact of that activity towards other things. Say for example, oh, I would like to have the training in Pattaya because I know a friend of mine is, or there's a sale for a hotel in Pattaya, but we know that this hotel is known for some human trafficking activities. Of course, when we do the planning, we will specifically ensure that we are not supporting businesses that are linked to human trafficking activities. So things like that. Gantt chart and activity work plan, we will discuss that in depth later on next month. But of course, it is the activity work plan. Some donors would give a specific template for it. Sometimes you just have to develop it on your own. So this is an example of a work plan from a project from the Philippines again. So you see, you can use colors. I know some of the units here love using a lot of colors in their Excel sheets. You can do that as well if it works. Some would just use symbols. So it's really up to you. And then of course, on the budget, it gives the specification on how the money will be allocated to implement the activities. Many donors will give their own template. Some donors will have their um, um, free flowing or freestyle. So for sometimes it looks like this, as simple as this, or sometimes it could be as you know complicated. So there. Um, I'm gonna stop my presentation at this point because I just want to gloss over the parts that many of you I think are familiar about, but I hope that you are able to get a little from here and then from the slides that I provided and from the discussions on how it really links on a practical level when we develop the projects. And linking on the theoretical discussion with Teresa and on the practices that we've done with Good Shepherd, I collated here some of the good project designs that we have identified throughout the years. So one would be the Mahila, a women's movement rising. This is documentation on the economic empowerment in India by our sisters in India. Then another will be a project from the Philippines for the empowerment of women against organizing communities to prevent gender-based violence. And then there is the education project from Myanmar, but not just talking about education, but the whole economic empowerment scenario. And then there are two other samples, like the microcredit changing lives in Honduras, and another one in Kogyo, in Congo for children in cobalt mines. But right now, I'm gonna stop sharing at this point, and I would like us to watch a video. I know that sometimes videos are a powerful tool to get the message across. So this sample is actually from Sri Lanka. Hi, sisters from Sri Lanka. And this is a good example of how to mirror rights-based approach, looking at your organizational values as good shepherd, looking at good project design, and looking at the whole circles of care. So here we go.
முதலாவது பார்த்தீங்கன்னா பேரண்ட்ஸ் வந்து அம்மா அப்பா 2 பேருமே வந்து வேலைக்கு போனால் தான் அந்த குடும்பத்தை வந்து சரியாக கொண்டு போக முடியும். அதாவது ஒரு நாள் சாப்பாட்டுக்கு சரியா. இந்த வகையில் இருக்கும்போது அவங்களுடைய பிள்ளைகள் பார்த்திங்கன்னா ஒரு வீட்டில் ஒரு 4 பிள்ளைகள் இருப்பாங்க, அதே மாதிரி 5 பிள்ளைகளும் இருப்பாங்க, ஒரு பிள்ளையும் இருப்பாங்க. ஸோ அந்த பிள்ளைகளோட படிப்பு செலவு உட்பட ஏனைய செலவுகள் இது எல்லாத்தையுமே வந்து அவங்க கரெக்டாக கொண்டு போகணும் அப்படின்னா அவங்களுக்கு அது சரியான கஷ்டம். இப்படி வேலையெல்லாம் செஞ்சுட்டு வரும்போது பிள்ளைகள் வந்து தனியாக தான் வீட்டில் இருப்பாங்க.
Today we see a lot of children are abused, exploited, abandoned by the family, by the community, by the society. Automatically they come to centers. But what we find is right through these children who are exploited by the society, abused, abandoned, neglected from the society are not happy in our institutions. Because right through we have not touched the root causes. So the root cause is somewhere in the family or in the society.
So the village is facing the problem to build on their own system, so which need social work intervention. So the community needs support.
I feel as duty bearers, as Good Shepherd sisters, we need to do something. We need to change. We need to create new methods to safeguard the rights of children.
And the methodology we wanted to use is creating child-friendly, safe places in their own localities. According to the programs that we have in the community-based system, many more children get benefits for their education.
So we have begun only 5 places, 5 projects so far. There can be more. We want to spread this more and more and reduce the number of children in our institutions.
Every evening they have evening classes, and many more children are coming to this safety place where they experience freedom. They are getting many more happy experiences in the child safety place.
So this is the support we can give from outside. Once they come from school, we get teachers, social workers, to give them extra classes. The school also gives them some homework. Earlier, I don't think there is somebody to support them. They can't send them to outside teachers. Parents are not able. Now the teachers who are going in the evening, they support them how to do their homework.
And then they are given, even we give them food, nourish them. We do nutrition programs because we see malnutrition there. Children are not fed properly.
They get opportunity to practice whatever the skills they have. They have a lot of potentials inside, but it doesn't come out because there's no stage for them to do it.
பெரும்பாலும் தோட்டப்புற பாடசாலைகள் தோட்டப்புற பிள்ளைகள் தான் பெரும்பாலும் துஷ்பிரயோகத்துக்கு அடிமைத்தனத்துக்கு வன்கொடுமைகளுக்கு உட்படுறாங்க.
Now they are in a protected environment. By evening, the parents come back from their jobs.
So they feel that they are protected and they are given education on child rights.
அப்போ இப்போ பிள்ளைகளுக்கு தெரியுது ஒரு குட் டச் பேட் டச் அதுனா என்னது முன்னெல்லாம் தெரியலை. இப்படி வன்கொடுமைகளுக்கு உட்பட்டு போகிற சதவீதம் குறைக்கிறதுக்கான முயற்சியில் இந்த வளைகுட தோட்டம் நல்லதொரு சதவீதத்தை நோக்கி போகிறதுன்றதுல எந்த வித மாற்றமும் இல்லை. நல்ல முன்னேற்றம் நல்லா போய்கிட்டு.
And education, how to protect themselves and protect their own siblings, their own friends, and they become the stakeholders or the leading factor to their own protection. Plantation sector, we see 70% of children do not continue their education.
And from parents' side, they will not have much encouragement, many of the parents.
So in this closed environment, what we have to do for the children to come out from these challenges, we need to create opportunities.
என் பேர் டிலான், நான் வளவையிலேருந்து வரேன். எங்களோட தாத்தா பாட்டியும் தேயிலை தான் படிச்சுக்கிட்டு இருந்தாங்க. அவங்களோட அம்மா அப்பாவும் தேயிலை தான் படிச்சுட்டு இருந்தாங்க. அடுத்த ஜென்ரேஷன் பார்த்தா எங்களோட அம்மா அப்பாவும் அவங்களும் இதே தான். நான் தான் வந்தால் பார்த்தா இந்த ஃபஸ்ட்லேருந்து படித்து ஒரு உயர்தரத்துக்கு தெரிவாகி அந்த கல்வியை கற்றுக்கிட்டு இருக்கேன்.
He was really a very shy boy. I had to fight with the parents to get this Dylan. Because the father said he is unable to come. I feel now a great change in him. He is very social and he takes initiative to do things.
நான் ஏழாவது ஃபஸ்ட் இயர் செஞ்சுக்கிட்டு இருக்கேன். எனக்கு பிடிச்ச பாடம் என்னென்னு பார்த்தா பொலிட்டிக்கல் சயின்ஸ் எனக்கு பிடிக்கும். மற்றபடி என்னென்னா நான் படித்து நல்ல நிலைக்கு ஆசைப்பட்றேன். அதாவது நான் படித்து எதிர்காலத்தில் ஒரு போலீஸ் ஆஃபீஸராக வரணும்னு நான் ஆசைப்பட்றேன்.
මං විනෝදාංශයක් විදිහට ඩ්‍රොයින් කරනවා. ඩ්‍රොයින් අඳින ගොඩක් ආසයි. මට දුකක් සතුටක් දැනනට මම ඩ්‍රොයින් එකක් කරනවා.
Takshila is a great girl and she's very much talented in every way, artist, and she had lot of potential. And I also was so much surprised why this girl is kept aside. Takshila had some painful stories, some personal painful moments, and I was given a lot of responsibility to her. And after 4 months, again she started going to school and she had a dream. She wants to be a drama teacher. She wants to go to university and she's capable of doing that.
මේ ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් එකෙන් මට විතරක් නෙමෙයි මගේ ඉන්න අනිත් යාළුවන්ටත් දැන් එයාලටත් ඉගෙන ගන්න ගොඩක් ආසයි. මේ කියන්නේ එයාලට තියෙන හැකියාවන් මේකෙන් එලි දැක්වෙනවා. එයාලට ස්ට්‍රේට් එකේ ළමයි ගියපන් එයාලට බැරි දෙයක් නෑ. එයාලා අතර තියෙන සැඟුණු දක්ෂතාවන් තියෙනවා. අපේ ස්ට්‍රේට් එකේ පුදුනාට අපේ තියෙන දක්ෂතාවන් අපිත් එලි දක්වන්න ගොඩක් ආසයි.
So we see some kind of a development within them, spiritually and socially and personally.
Community-based child development, what I feel is you educate, you empower the parents, children, the relatives and the entire community there.
And also we give a lot of awareness programs for families, parenting skills, and also about their rights. And they don't know actually they are always violated in the family and also in the career places, factories. So ultimately we will be supporting them to look after their own children, to look after themselves and to build up a proper family system in their localities.
And we all have to strive together for a better future, to develop a village.
My hope is that we will create a space where all our children, women and girls experience fullness of life, dignity and freedom.
To create a better world for our children to live, that is our purpose. One day we want to see a better world for our children, they are the future.
Right. So I hope that everyone did not sleep on that very inspiring video, linking towards linking all the necessary ingredients to create a good project design, or understanding the problem itself. You see, in Sri Lanka, we have a lot of centers, but then they realize, for the last 15 years or for the last decades, it could have been not as effective as before. So they try to change and shift their community base, and changing how the design works, and being an institution that is open, to develop the methodology. The story of that video that we just watched summarizes how we could link theory, circles of care, how to change the individual, the family, the community, the nation, and then having a right set of methodologies, crafting it the way they would like to achieve it. It all boils into like a very good dish. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation, and I'll bring you to Teresa to wrap it up.
Okay, so over to you, Veronica, to close the session.
Yay!
Bye bye, everyone. See you in April.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.